quiero dar paso a continuación a Ana Maleiro. Ana Maleiro es jefa adjunta de Unidad de Regulación de Plataformas y Mercados Digitales de la DG Connect de la Comisión Europea. Además, fue encargada en casos en el grupo de trabajo de la DMA de la DG Comp. Anteriormente, Ana fue la administradora principal en el Comité INCO del Parlamento Europeo, responsable de la DMA, también de la DSA y la ley de IA. Cuenta con una amplia experiencia en competencia y regulación en los sectores de telecomunicaciones, transporte y energía, habiendo trabajado previamente para una Autoridad Nacional de Competencia y un bufete de abogados. Así que eskerrik asko, Ana, y te cedo la palabra.
Buenos días a todos. Me gustaría empezar por agradecer a la señora presidenta por la amable invitación y también al decano de esta universidad, José Jamón, y a Julia por la amable bienvenida en esta casa. Es para mí un placer enorme estar aquí en Bilbao, que es una ciudad con la cual tengo una relación muy especial, tengo buenos amigos aquí, y poder compartir con vosotros un poco mis reflexiones del contributo que la regulación europea de las plataformas online puede hacer en el sector del turismo. El País Vasco es un buen ejemplo de cómo el turismo puede transformar una ciudad. Yo soy de Oporto y he visto lo mismo. En esto, como sabemos, con la digitalización, el papel de las plataformas se ha destacado de forma muy importante, de unas formas positivas, permitiendo a pequeñas empresas tener acceso a muchos consumidores, pero también trayendo riesgos y nuevos retos. Yo me gustaría de usar una imagen para ilustrar un poco de lo que de lo que hablaré en mi presentación. Hoy un turista europeo que se está leyendo en su móvil, en Instagram o en el social media, lee una noticia sobre una exposición genial en Guggenheim de Richard Serra que le encantó y le dice, voy a Bilbao, quiero verlo. En pocos minutos se mira, va a Google, hace una búsqueda, a Instagram, va a Booking, Airbnb y en pocos segundos, minutos, va a tomar un montón de decisiones. Si quiere ir, si no quiere, cómo va a pagar, va a reservar hotel, va a reservar coche, restaurante, taxi. Todo esto se hace hoy en muchas pocas plataformas. Se lo hace en 2 o 3 plataformas. Esto creó esta situación un imbalance comercial muy importante porque tenemos pequeños prestadores de servicio que dependen de forma muy grande de un limitado número de empresas, de plataformas. Y es aquí que nosotros entramos. ¿Qué se estaban planteando los consumidores, nosotros, cuando están haciendo mis decisiones? Yo quiero confiar en lo que estoy haciendo, porque estoy partiendo mi número de crédito. Entonces, quiero estar segura que lo que estoy comprando, que el anuncio que he visto en Internet no es fake, que es un anuncio verdadero, que la gente con la que estoy contratando existe, que el advertising que estoy viendo no es fake, y si lo miro y es ilegal, tengo que tener formas de notificar la plataforma y decir, esto es ilegal, tiene que ser retirado. Al mismo tiempo, las empresas tienen también cuestiones legítimas. Por ejemplo, se pregunta a una empresa que depende de estas plataformas, ¿por qué mi servicio ya no se ve más? ¿Por qué mi hotel desapareció? ¿Por qué estoy siendo objeto de reviews que no son verdad, no son verdaderas. Será mi competidor que está utilizando y me está, destruyendo mi presencia online. Otras cuestiones legítimas. Si tengo un hotel, si tengo mis clientes que han comprado mis servicios, ¿por qué no puedo tener acceso a los datos de mis clientes? ¿Por qué será una empresa o una plataforma que tiene si los clientes son míos? ¿Y por qué no puedo ofrecer mejor condiciones en mis hoteles? Porque tengo que estar vinculado a las condiciones que he establecido en una plataforma. Todo esto serán cuestiones que a lo mejor a vosotros resonan, imagino. Estas son las cuestiones a las cuales damos respuesta a través del DSA y del DMA. Ahora que he hecho un esfuerzo para hablar español, perdonad, pero es que planeaba terminar un poco antes, pero me he desafiado a hablar un poco más español. Con vuestra, pues si me permiten, continuaré ahora en inglés, dado el carácter muy técnico de mi presentación, que creo que ni siquiera en portugués lo podría hacer. En los próximos slides lo que voy a hacer es presentar el DMA, el Digital Markets Act, y el DSA. El primero trata de las cuestiones de regulación económica. Esencialmente, para quien de vosotros tiene empresas y depende de grandes plataformas para llegar a vuestros clientes, un hotel o... Esto son los derechos y las obligaciones que se impone a estas empresas. Y el DSA es lo que da derechos a los utilizadores y que tienen consideraciones más de seguridad y confianza de utilización de las plataformas. Muy bien, entonces avanzo. So first, I will speak about the Digital Markets Act. Si tenéis preguntas en español, no hesitar, por favor. Sorry, no, it's difficult to change to English now. So basically, as I was saying, there are a handful of companies today that matter for the economy, and in particular the tourism economy, and this handful, so it could be search engines that basically are today closed ecosystems to which both consumers and business users have difficulty in engaging with. So it is a handful, and this is what the DMA is aiming to deal with. So what it is what do we want to achieve with the DMA? It's already in place since 2 years. It's to have fair and contestable markets, doing this by empowering users, by giving them more rights, for example, rights to decide what data can companies use, but also giving them more choice. For example, now you can, on your mobile, decide what web browsers or search engines do you want to use. This was not possible before the DMA. And we also break up what we called, or open up what we call the closed ecosystems that some companies used to be working on by giving, for example, access to data by companies. So this is a regulation, it's directly applicable. And it targets, this is what it is particular, there are essentially two concepts. The concept of gatekeeper and core platform service. Gatekeeper, it is, so basically the DMA only targets companies that meet very strong, very high thresholds. First of which is that they serve above 45 million users and 10,000 business users. And this means that, as you will see later, we are only tackling, we have today 7 designated companies with this status. This regulation, contrary to the DSA, only applies to these big companies. In addition to that, it applies to certain services like social media or, for the tourism sector, very important, marketplaces. and many others, but that are perhaps less relevant for you. And in addition to this, it sets out a number of do's and don'ts, and this is very prescriptive. It's really worldwide the most prescriptive regulatory framework addressed to online platforms. We have to see that before this, we were working on the basis of the Platform to Business Regulation and the e-commerce directive, and of course antitrust, since we are in as well speaking to an antitrust forum, of course, but the antitrust, we realized, was not enough nor quick enough to solve these issues, and that's how the DMA comes into place. So this is very briefly to give you, I think it's perhaps for this audience too much detail, but it is essentially from the moment the company is very big, reaches out to many people, is used by many business users, and for some period of time, it is designated by the Commission, it is then the status of gatekeeper, and then by law, a number of obligations apply. Here you see that essentially the services that we are considering, all the 7, and you will see easily for the tourism sector, of course, booking and the social media are quite important. And then a number, you see, have the social, the intermediation services, Google Maps, shopping, that are all services that are directly regulated by a regulation in Europe. Then you have a number of obligations that may be clustered, I would say maybe for your convenience, for the tourism sector, very important is, of course, the obligation of no self-preferencing. To translate in practical terms is basically to say to Google that they cannot privilege their own results. And the same for any other platform. So they cannot put their own products or services or hotels or whatever before any other. This didn't exist so far, this rule, and it was actually filled by antitrust. And as you know, those who are more familiar, Google search is a long saga that that in a way also justifies the existence of the DMA in the first place. It costed everyone time and money, and now this obligation of no self-preference exists, and as you know as well, there is the Commission is looking into this very carefully. Then the second is what I mentioned that we called in jargon the most favored nations clauses, which is basically when the platform conditions the ability of providers to offer better conditions elsewhere, be it on their own site or being in third-party sites. And this is today, there was a big, for those also following this discussion more closely, it was also a long battle of antitrust with many decisions, many member states taking action against booking, and eventually this ended up with the regulation. So both what we call narrow and broad MFNs are by law forbidden today. And the third that has also impact for the tourism sector is also the data access. The fact that what I mentioned before, is that a hotel now can download the booking history and demand and have access to the data of its own customers. For those who have businesses, this is gold, because it allows you to know, to do marketing, to reach out to your customers, and so on and so forth. In terms of governance, how does this work? Differently from the DMA, the DSA that I will refer in a bit. The DMA has the full, so the Commission enjoys the full and exclusive powers to enforce the DMA. It does so in close cooperation and dialogue with the competition authorities and other relevant authorities. It is important to say that this regulation, because it benefited from the bad experience of antitrust, already enjoys a wide margin of power, I would say, in terms of investigation powers, because the Commission can do inspections, they can send the requests for information, they can access to algorithms, and this goes is more far-reaching than, or more explicit than it was the case for antitrust so far. And then the decisions are binding, of course. Non-compliance decisions can go up to 10% of the annual turnover. And if repeated, the infringement, the fines can go up to 20%. But even more importantly than that, if there is the Commission found in 3 cases within a limited, I believe, a limited number of years, 3 infringements, the Commission is now then entitled to impose structural or behavioral remedies. This is very powerful because for those who work in competition, they know that when we liberalized the telecoms and the energy and the utilities markets, back then the big discussion was what are we going to do with the natural monopolies? But there were no powers under antitrust, only measure control, there was some scope for action, but we didn't have the power to impose because we didn't have the case that would justify the imposition of this remedy. In the digital world, this was considered by the Parliament. It was a suggestion by the Parliament that it was key for the companies to take the Commission seriously. We haven't used it yet, but it's there. So this is so far so to recap a bit, how does the DMA would benefit the tourism and empower the business users in the tourism sector? So first, fair visibility in search and ranking. So what you see, it must be explained, and they cannot self-privilege. They providers have freedom to offer better conditions. So if a hotel can advertise book directly with me and you get a 10% off, the gatekeepers cannot forbid. They can have access to data. Data cannot be used against you. So the gatekeeper cannot assess your pricing and then adjust their pricing to their own benefit. And of course, overall, through more competition, you have more alternatives to the benefit of everyone. So esto fue un poco para el DMA, no sé si para alguien que, no sé cómo sumarizarlo, pero si alguien tiene preguntas, tengo todo el placer en intentar contestarlas. Si no, sigo para una pequeña, I'm going to do a bit of a side observation because this is an audience. We have the competition authority hosting us, and I understood it is important to do just a small observation with regards to the interplay between DMA and antitrust. So this is what is also revolutionary with the DMA. Some people find it a bit too intrusive, and it's a fair observation. But it comes, of course, out of the frustration we all had, notably with Google search and the likes, that were the subject of infringement actions against them by the Commission, committed but then constructively did not comply with what the Commission expected them to do. And this frustration led to a tool where legislators said we need fast and effective enforcement, whatever it takes. And so what do we have? Contrary to antitrust, in the DMA, you essentially don't have to define relevant markets because they are defined by law. It's a fast-track antitrust. No market definition. You don't have to prove the wrongdoing. In a self-preferencing case under antitrust, you have to build the entire theory of harm, particularly on self-preferencing. Why is this wrong? Why? Here, it is wrong because the co-legislator decided it's wrong. And of course, they didn't decide it so because they woke up and were in a bad mood, but it is because there was a precedent and a history. So these are, one is ex ante, so the DMA is ex ante and aims to prevent these behaviors by prohibiting them by law. So these are, in a nutshell, the differences. And now, moving to the most complex piece of legislation in Europe, in my opinion, today, the DSA. The DSA is often misunderstood because people say DSA, it's about disinformation, others say it's a censorship tool, others say, but you also associate the DSA with protection of minors, consumer protection, illegal goods, fake reviews, and the reality is everything falls within the DSA. So it is complex to understand and therefore misunderstood, but it encompasses all of these. And how does it do? So first, contrary to the DMA, the DSA does not target just the big ones. It targets everyone as long as they are intermediary services. And then what happens is that it applies a proportionate different level of obligations depending on the nature of the service. And this is what these slides aims to show. So basically, if we are talking about telecoms companies, they have some obligations, for example, as simple as the need to have a point of contact, which seems common sense, but apparently some companies didn't have a point of contact. If it's a hosting service, then you have additional obligations. Online platforms, further obligations. And then if you are what we call a villa per villas, which is the cousin of the gatekeeper, if you wish, for the DMA, then you do have much more obligations, notably to do risk assessments. So essentially, if you want to use a comparison, if we have a highway, if you want to drive the highway, there are risks for society if you want to put a car in a highway. And then one needs to have as a society that there are some insurances, that it is safe to drive in a highway. Speed limit or not speed limit. Do we have signs? Do we don't have signs? Do we have So there are a number of obligations that are justified by the public interest considerations. And here is the same. But of course, because the risks are so broad, they can go illegal content, protection of minor, addiction, all of these. How do we do that with one law? So what we have is a provision that says to these companies, you have, if you want to drive the big Porsche, I don't know, I'm not very knowledgeable about cars, but one of the fastest one, if you want to drive one of those, then take a step back, think what are the risks, and then you can. If you don't do that and you are just driven by profit and you don't care about it, which is what has been happening so far, then you will face the consequences. So this is in a very simplified way what we are doing. And maybe just to because of course in the beginning we heard the consejero de Turismo saying about, of course, what do you do if there are a number of provisions already in place. If you see the notice and action already applies at the level of hosting services. So there are important legal obligations that trigger liability or not under certain conditions. And these already exist in law and they need to be put into practice. A side note is that Spain hasn't yet designated the digital service coordinator. So I use this to it's one of the few member states who haven't yet, and it's an important omission because it means that that citizens are left with important protections. So This is quite important. So who are these companies? So we have 23 platforms, 2 search engines. You see the different nature. You have adult content companies that you see because it's a big problem. There is any child can today access to adult content without anyone noticing, and with great and serious consequences in mental health for young people. But you also have social media, you have marketplaces, you have and search engines. So there is a myriad of different of services of a different nature. What do they all have in common? They are all intermediary services, and they all have more than 45 million. I know that now many of you will be asking, why is there a certain company not yet there? It's not there because probably the numbers haven't yet been met. Very likely, otherwise it would be there. I'm just saying. So now, who, differently from the DMA, where the Commission is calling the shots, if you wish, here it is more complex, as you saw. So we have different levels of enforcement competences. The Commission goes after the big ones, so the top of the pyramid, and then together with the Digital Service Coordinator. And here it is very important because the e-commerce directive from which the DSA is built established the country of origin principle. And this means that it is the country of origin that regulates the companies that are established in their respective member state. And we work together because of this complex cooperation with a board where the independent authorities are present and where we take coordinated action. For example, recently, financial scams and scams overall in the internet are a big problem. And at the board, it was decided that enforcement coordinated action across Europe would be tackled. And this is the type of decisions that the board can take in terms of setting priorities together. Investigative powers, very briefly, it's more or less the same as the DMA, with important, the levels of fines are quite important, slightly lower than the DMA. Here we can go up to 6%. What have we been doing so far? We designated 23 as you saw in the picture before, 2 search engines, and we have currently 70 formal proceedings that look into ads, illegal goods, protection of minors, data access, algorithm transparency. So it's a plethora of different interests. You can see here that we started in 2023. We opened our first decision against X. The 2024 was essentially where we adopted a number of opening decisions, and we also managed to have commitments from TikTok that are very important for protection of minors, but I will not expand much on this. And then we continued throughout 2025, where we adopted the decision against X. Here, maybe I would emphasize the fact that the notice and actions, which is so important, as the Consejero de Turismo mentioned, so the ability of any of you or even a company to flag what is illegal, to make sure that the EU citizen that is searching on the web knows and can notify. This, we have a number of actions against several VLOPs in this respect, and also at the member state. The Irish has investigations against Meta and LinkedIn also on this. So this is taking traction. So how do we empower business users then here? Removal of fake hotels or scams. So they must verify business users. There is the obligation at the so-called Know Your Business Customer that the platforms must know who engages with them, who is there. Is before, no one knew. I was buying on Amazon. I always thought, Amazon is a serious platform. And you have this reflex of thinking, well, they are known, they are serious, but still you could buy fake things because they wouldn't check. And today they have a legal obligation to check and to remove if it is illegal. And if they don't, they can no longer claim that they are not liable. So if a scammer lists a fake luxury villa, the platform has to take it down quickly when reported. The same fake reviews. They must remove fake reviews if a user reports. And they also have to explain why they remove it. Because as we know, there are also over-removals. If you are an hotel and the positive reviews are systematically removed, you also want to understand why. And that's why it's not only there is an obligation to remove, but there is also an obligation to justify. And this is public information. There is a database. If you are interested, you can see the companies need to say why did they remove, what are the legal grounds, in respect to whom. Everything is a platform accessible to every citizen who is interested on this. And it's quite effective. They also must be transparent. So why this hotel and not that? And businesses can also challenge decisions and use the complaint handling mechanisms that platforms are obliged to have. So, para concluir, estas son dos, voy a intentar concluir en español o en portuñol, como decimos en Portugal. Una tiene un objetivo más económico y beneficia más y sobre todo a las empresas, indirectamente también a los consumidores, al promover la competencia. El DSA tiene como objetivo la creación de un espacio de seguridad, que uno esté en la Internet, donde todos nosotros perdemos mucho tiempo, en Instagram, en Facebook, donde sea, en Temo, en Shein, en AliExpress, y que tengamos la confianza de que estas empresas no están en el Far West, si queréis. Es decir, hay reglas y no se puede hacer llegar en la Unión Europea cosas que de otra forma no se haría negar en una tienda física. Y este es un poco el principio y la lógica. Una última palabra para decir, hay aquí un elemento muy importante que se llama el mercado interno. Y es responsabilidad de la Comisión y de todos los Estados miembros de hacer con que no percamos este valor añadido que es el mercado interno. Y el mercado interno no existe sin reglas comunes. Y eso fue una de las principales motivaciones, diría, de tener un DMA y un DSA. Y esto significa también algún compromiso de los Estados miembros de comprender que cuando las reglas están establecidas hay un efecto de armonización que beneficia a todos y que debe ser respetado. Es solo esto. Muchas gracias por vuestra paciencia, sobre todo porque no es tan fácil como me parecía al principio cambiar de portuñol para inglés, pero espero haber conseguido. Muchas gracias.